Hi kids, I've been looking out in the garden, can you tell? Okay, today we're going to start Mrs. Piggle Wiggle. First chapter is Mrs. Piggle Wiggle herself. Hey, can you notice how this book is kind of worn out? It's been used and read a lot. That's because it's been loved. Have you ever heard the saying called, you can't tell a book by its cover? It's true. You can't tell because this book is all worn out and beat up. Doesn't mean it doesn't have wonderful stories inside. It does. And you know, it's the same with people. You can't tell what they're like from the outside because it's what's in their heart that counts, right? Okay, Mrs. Piggle Wiggle herself. I expect I might as well begin by telling you all about Mrs. Piggle Wiggle, so that whenever I mention her name, which I do very often in this book, you'll not interrupt and ask, who is Mrs. Piggle Wiggle? What does she look like? How big is she? How old is she? What color is her hair? Is her hair long? Does she wear high heels? Does she have any children? Is there a Mr. Piggle Wiggle? Mrs. Piggle Wiggle lives here in our town. She's very small and has a hump on her back. When the children ask her about the hump, she says, "Oh, that's a big lump of magic." Sometimes it turns me into a witch, other times into a dwarf or a fairy, and on special occasions it makes me into a queen. The children are all very envious of the hump because besides being magic, it is such a convenient fastening place for wings. Mrs. Piggle Wiggle has brown sparkly eyes and brown hair which she keeps very long, almost to her knees, so the children can comb it. She usually wears it on top of her head in a knot unless someone has been combing it, and then she has braids or long wet curls or long hair just hanging with a jeweled crown or flowers on top. One day I saw her digging in her garden wearing the jeweled crown and with her hair billowing back down her back. She waved gaily and said, "I promised Betsy," Betsy is one of her children friends, "that I would not touch this hair until she came home from school." She went on with her digging. Mrs. Piggle Wiggle's skin is a goldy brown and she has a warm, spicy, sugary cookie smell that's very comforting to children who are sad about something. Her clothes are all brown and never look crisp and well ironed because they often are used for dress up. She wears felt hats, which the children poke and twist into witches' hats and pirates' hats, and she doesn't mind at all. Sunday morning she takes one of the hats off the closet shelf, gives it a few thumps, pulls it firmly down in the front and the back, and she wears her very high heels all the time and is glad to let the little girls borrow them. Mrs. Piggle Wiggle has no family at all. She says that her husband, Mr. Piggle Wiggle, was a pirate, and after he had buried all of his treasure in the backyard, he died. She just has herself and Wag, her dog, and Lightfoot, her cat. The most remarkable thing about Mrs. Piggle Wiggle is her house, which is upside down. It is a little brown house, and sitting there in a tangly garden, it looks like a small brown puppy lying on its back with its feet in the air. Mrs. Piggle Wiggle says that when she was a little girl, she used to lie in bed and gaze up at the ceiling and wonder what it would be like if the house was upside down. And so when she grew up and built her own house, she had it built upside down just to see what it would be like. The bathroom, the kitchen, and the staircase are right side up. It's more convenient that way. You can easily see that you could not cook on an upside-down stove or wash dishes in an upside-down sink or walk up upside-down stairs. In the living room of her house is a large chandelier, and instead of being on the ceiling, it's on the floor. Of course, it's really on the ceiling, but the ceiling is the floor, so it is on the floor, and the children turn on the lights and then squat around it pretending it's a campfire. Mrs. Piggle Wiggle says that her chandelier is the only one in town which is put to any real use. Her bedrooms all have slidey boards in them because if you look up at her attic ceiling, you will see that a slanty ceiling, when upside down, makes a fine slidey board. Also, all the walls are very close to the floor and handy for the children. For the first 5 or 10 years after the house was built, Mrs. Piggle Wiggle climbed in and out of her rooms over the high doorways, but now she has little steps which are just the thing to practice jumping. she gives the children chalk so they can mark on the rug how far they jump. Nobody knows how old Mrs. Piggle is. She says she doesn't know herself. She says, what difference does it make how old I am, when I shall never grow any bigger? Mrs. Piggle's dog, Wag, has puppies every once in a while, and so she keeps a long list of names of children who want them on the blackboard. Oh, she keeps a long list of the names of children who want the puppies on the blackboard in the kitchen. For Lightfoot, the cat's kittens, she has a long waiting list on the blackboard in the dining room. Mrs. Piggle's backyard is full of big holes where small boys dig for Mr. Piggle's buried treasure, and her front yard is full of flowers which the little girls pick and jam into vases and place about her living room or carry to their teachers. Every child in town is a friend of Mrs. Piggle's, but she knows very few of their parents. She says grown-ups make her nervous. For the first year after she built her house, Mrs. Piggle lived there all by herself except for Wag and Lightfoot, and she was very lonely. Then one dark, raining afternoon, when she was baking sugar cookies and thinking how much fun it would be if she knew someone besides Wag and Lightfoot to invite for tea, she happened to look out her kitchen window, and there, coming up the street in the pouring rain, dragging a big suitcase and crying hard, was a little girl. Mrs. Piggle wiped the flour off her hands and hurried right out into the rain and invited the little girl in for tea. The little girl's name was Mary Lou Robertson, and she was 8 years old and quite fat, and she was running away from home. She told Mrs. Piggle all this after she had drunk 3 cups of cambric tea and eaten 7 sugar cookies. She said, I'm running away from home because I hate to wash dishes. All I do is wash dishes. I'm just a servant. Dishes, dishes, dishes. Wash, dry, put away. Wash, dry, put away. That's all I do. My mother doesn't love me at all. She isn't my real mother anyway. She probably got me out of an orphanage just to wash her dishes. Mary Lou began to cry again, so that the 8th sugar cookie got quite soggy before she finished it. Mrs. Piggle said, Isn't she your real mother? Mary Lou said, She says she is, but no real mother would make you wash dishes. Wash dishes, wash dishes. Now that's a funny thing, said Mrs. Piggle. I mean, you're hating to wash dishes so much, because you see, I like to wash dishes. In fact, I enjoy washing dishes so much that a cause of great sorrow to me is the fact that the only dishes I must wash are for Wag and Lightfoot and me. 3 or 4 dishes a meal, that's it. When I wash dishes, Mary Lou, I pretend that I'm a beautiful princess with long golden curly hair. Mary Lou's hair was jet black and braided into 2 stiff little pigtails. The apple blossom skin and forget-me-not eyes, blue eyes. I pretend I've been captured by a wicked witch, and my only chance to get free is to wash every single dish and have the whole kitchen sparkling clean before the clock strikes. For when the clock strikes, the witch will come down and inspect to see if the crumbs are anywhere, if there are pots and pans that have been put away wet, or if the silverware has been thrown in the drawer, or if the sink has been scrubbed out. The witch will, if any of that happens, the witch will have me in her power for another year. Mrs. Piggle looked at the clock and jumped up. It's 10 minutes to 4, Princess, and we have so much to do. Hurry, hurry, hurry. Mary Lou also jumped up and began carrying the tea things to the sink, and Mrs. Piggle whisked them in and out of the dishwater. And Mary Lou dried them, and Mrs. Piggle hurried as fast as she could and put the cookie things away, and every once in a while she would stop and say, Hark, Princess, do you hear the thump of the witch's big gnarly cane? Then Mary Lou, her braids bobbing up and down with excitement, would say, I hear it, Princess. It's coming closer and closer. Soon the kitchen sparkled, and the dishes were washed and dried and put away, and every crumb had been swept off the floor. Mary Lou even curled Lightfoot's tail neatly around her legs and smoothed Wag's fur just before the clock struck. Mrs. Piggle said to Mary Lou, Princess, I must leave you now, but show the witch your work, and oh, I do hope you will be freed. Then she went upstairs, and pretty soon down the stairs came a terrible old witch with a long black dress, a tall black hat, and big gnarly-looking black cane. Mary Lou was very scared until she saw the sparkling eyes of Mrs. Piggle under the black hat. She showed the witch the kitchen, and the witch took out the cookie pans and carried them over to the light to see if they were truly dry and truly clean. She got down on her knees, squeaking like a rusty gate, to see if Mary Lou had swept under the stove. She felt inside the teacups to see if there was sugar in the bottom, and she put on her glasses to examine the sink. But she could not find anything wrong, so she handed Mary Lou the key to the kitchen door and screeched out, "You are free, princess, but I will get you again, never fear." And then the witch clumped back up the stairs, and in a few minutes down came Mrs. Piggle. "Well," said Mrs. Piggle, "do you see why I like to wash dishes?" Mary Lou said, "Oh, Mrs. Piggle, that was the most fun I've ever had." Mrs. Piggle said, "Of course, you can have more fun than I because you have so many more dishes to wash at your house." "If I only had more dishes and could take longer, I would be a princess with curly yellow long hair, apple blossom skin, blue eyes, and a beautiful voice, and I would sing songs over the dishpan. Also, if I had more dishes, I would have the witch ride through the night on a broomstick, and I would creep out on the back porch to see if she was coming. I could hear her land with a thump on the roof, and I could slip upstairs to see if she was going to slide down the chimney or thump down the stairs. Oh, there would be ever so many exciting things to pretend if only I had more dishes to wash." After a while it stopped raining, and the sun came out, and Mary Lou took her suitcase and went home. That night her mother, it really was her mother, of course, almost fainted when she came out to the kitchen exactly 27 minutes after dinner, and Mary Lou was sweeping the floor, and all the dishes were washed and dried and put away, and everything was immaculate. Mrs. Robertson rushed in and called Mary Lou's father, and he came out to the kitchen and pretended to fall on the floor with surprise, and then he said to Mary Lou's mother, "I like your new maid, madam. In fact, she is so much better than Tilly Slopwash, who used to be here, and I think we should invite her to the moving picture show some early evening."